Okay. Can I start, ma'am? Here is hearty welcome to you, Shubhangi ma'am. Today she is going to talk on topic understanding child sexual abuse. Child sexual abusement. We people know it. We read it in newspaper, sometimes on television also. And we say, how could these people do bad things with children? And after sometimes हम लोग कहते हैं जाने दो होता ही है. But there are some people who don't say जाने दो. They think in their mind, what can I do? What is my responsibility? The word responsibility in Marathi we says kartavya. The word kartavya, how connected to our today's guest? I will be glad to introduce Shubhangi ma'am's such a kartavya. Shubhangi Shinde. She has been associated with Arpan, a Mumbai-based NGO for the past 10 years. In her teenage, she realized how important it is to focus upon child safety and as a way to create awareness among parents about child sexual abuse. She initiated a program called Kartavya and reached out to 500 parents in 2 years. After completing her formal education, she joined Arpan, where she got the opportunity to reach larger number of stakeholders. She has directly worked with children of all age groups as well as developed content to teach personal safety skills to adolescents. Presently, she is working as an assistant manager at Arpan, where her role is to build capacities of relevant stakeholders so they too can participate in creating a world free of child sexual abuse. So, I am very thankful to Dr. Gayatri ma'am to give me such an opportunity to welcome Shubhangi ma'am. Over to Shubhangi ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, ma'am. Asmita, just one concern. Usually at Arpan, we don't record our sessions. So if it's possible to not record this session, it would be really great.
Actually, my correspondence earlier had made it very clear that it will be recorded only for academic purpose, no commercial purpose. It will be available only for academic groups.
Okay. Okay. So if this conversation has happened, then all right.
Yeah, in my first letter itself,
okay,
we had made it very clear. Yeah. Let's do one thing. Let's record and then talk about it. In case if there are legal issues involved, then we may not release the recording.
Sure.
Is that okay, Shubhangi?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start my screen share.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. I hope the presentation is visible to you all who are attending this session. Thank you so much for being here, and also thank you, Haxe, for having us here today, giving us the opportunity to connect with you all and talk about the issue of child sexual abuse. We want as many people as possible to know about the issue, know about how it happens, and what are the things that we can do to help prevent it. Yeah. So the idea behind today's session is to create that awareness, that basic understanding that how do I identify, how do I help children, what are the things that I can do to ensure that children are safe, and not just children that are in our homes, but children anywhere, any contact that you have with children, be it in professional space, be it in a space such as on the streets, at mall, at any public place for that matter. So we will begin the session, but before I begin, I would also like to have share with you some guidelines. Since this session is happening online, I would request you all to use either earphones, or ensure that, you know, wherever you are, children are not, or children will not be able to listen to this content. Because we this session, since it's happening online, most of you could be attending it at their homes. Yeah. So since this content is not uh, child appropriate, it's not appropriate for children, we would highly request you to not allow children to listen to this. As much as it's about children, it's not for children, right? Also, since this content, this issue itself is so sensitive, there is a possibility that we may feel overwhelmed after listening to the session. And if at any point in time you feel overwhelmed, or you feel that I am not able to listen to this anymore, feel free to take that break. Feel free to step away from your devices, have a drink of water, maybe eat something sweet, and come back, join back whenever you are feeling comfortable, or you feel okay, I can come back and attend this session. So don't worry about that. And ask questions, or, you know, in any possible way where you can share your questions, do share them. We'll try and address them during the session, through our content itself. Yeah. All right, so let's continue and talk about what today's session is about. So when we started, to give you a background, when we started conducting online sessions, it was mainly because of the pandemic. And when pandemic was, when that issue, that entire situation, you know, we all were at home, we were in lockdowns, and one thing that that was constantly spoken about was the COVID virus, and how it's affecting us all, and all of those conversations were constantly happening. However, we all, or most of us, were not talking about a silent pandemic. Silent pandemic being the issue of child sexual abuse, which when you look at the entire environment that the lockdown created, was such where children were at home, they were not able to go out of their homes, they were not able to reach out to their support systems out of homes. And we all may know that not necessary for children, homes not necessary that they are the safe place for all children. Sometimes homes itself can be spaces where something unsafe is happening. And that's why when the lockdown happened, when people were asked to stay home, uh, that condition, that entire environment, it created ground where more abuse can happen, or more children can be put into unsafe situations. And because children were not out of homes, they had no way to seek help. Yes, the times have changed. The lockdown has lifted, and children are out of their homes. Children are able to come to school, meet new people, meet their support systems in ways. But let's not forget that though lockdown is not there, and slowly, gradually, life is coming back to the norms that we were used to, let's not forget that, you know, this vulnerable section of our society still exists. They are there. Yeah. And why we need to talk about CSA, why we need to be aware about CSA, is because a whole lot of people are not having these conversations. So one thing that I hope that you all do after today's session is go out, after this session, go out and have one conversation with one person. It could be your sibling, it could be your friend, it could be just about anybody. If we can, you know, one person from our group, if one of them can go out and have this conversation, that's one more person who's more aware about the issue, one more person who's more equipped to handle the issue, protect children better. Yeah. So I hope we all do that after today's session. And yes, so let's understand, now that we are on the topic of children, let's also understand who these children are. So when we usually have these conversations around who children are, the idea around children are they're innocent, they are young ones. But when I probe further and ask them, when I probe further, and I asked them, whom would you call a child? Say, uh, give me an age bracket of who these children could be. Most adults have combined said that maybe 0 to 12, 0 to 14, 0 to 16. And the idea where this concept or where this definition for them was coming from was that 14-year-olds are so mature, 16-year-old are they can do things by themselves. But when we look at children and we look at uh, whom we can call children, let's remember the legal definition of children. Children are individuals below the age of 18 years. Yes, a 16-year-old is mature comparatively to a 10-year-old. But does that mean that that 16-year-old will not require any guidance from our side, will not require any support from us? Or a 16-year-old would be equipped enough to go and make those decisions that will help them? The kind of decisions, we adults take, long-term decisions that can have a long-term impact on our lives. Can a 16-year-old make that decision? No, they can't. Why they can't? Because they are still in the process of development, still getting there. When you look at construction areas, they have these boards usually put up saying work in progress. What does it mean? That it's like it's not complete yet, but it's not it's there, it's happening slowly, gradually, it's happening. A 16-year-old is similarly like that. It's their work in progress, their development is still happening. Emotional, physical, mental development is still happening. And that's why the 18 is such a crucial age. You look at our system, they have built systems around that age group, that post 18 you can vote, post 18 you can make life changing decisions for yourself. So yeah, and especially when we talk in the space of child sexual abuse, 18 is a very, very crucial age, because again there are laws protecting children from sexual abuse, and we will be talking about them in our today's session that would be happening in the second half. So I won't go too much into detail because I want you all to have something more to discuss and talk about there. Yeah? So who is a child? A child is somebody who's below the age of 18. Yeah. And do these children require rights? Is there any need for them to have rights? Do they require rights? There could be a mixed answer around that. Some may say children already have rights. Some may say that children why do they need rights? I mean, we can decide to give them, but why do they need rights? They need rights. One of the key reasons why children need rights is because they are individuals. Yeah, they exist as individuals. They are not state's property. They are not parents' property. They exist as an individual. Yeah, and also when you look at children, one thing that separates children from adults is the fact that children are dependent on their caregivers, on their support system for their needs to be met. For example, a 10-year-old though can walk around, is mobile enough to do things by themselves, maybe take a bath, maybe change their clothes by themselves, but for something crucial such as medical assistance, whether I'll be taken to a doctor or not, they are dependent on somebody else. Hello. Okay, they are dependent on somebody else. A 5-year-old child will be dependent on their caregiver for food, for maybe having a bath, wearing clean clothes, medical assistance, care and affection, some such simple things. And this dependency is what makes children vulnerable to getting their rights, violated. And for that very reason, to ensure that such violations do not happen, children have rights. They need rights. Yeah. So what are the rights they have? I'm sure you all must have read or heard about United Conventions on Rights of Children. In simple language, it's an agreement. Yeah, where our government or our country ratified this agreement and said that we will ensure that the children in our country will receive these 54 rights. And when you look at these 54 rights, they can be broadly classified into these 4 categories: right to survival, development, right to participation, right to protection. So right to life, right to survival will cover everything: right to life, nutrition, healthcare, having a proper house, or a place where shelter, having proper shelter. Right to development will cover everything, including your getting to be able to go to school, to be able to play, to be able to get involved in activities that the child has fun with. Yeah. So these are some of the rights that children have. Another important right is right to participation. Now, when we talk about participation, a lot of the times, especially where we were talking to parents, they would come back with concerns such as, you know what, Shubhangi, if we give children all these rights, they will start saying no to everything, or they will refuse everything. They will keep asking questions. And the thing is, there is nothing wrong with it. It's as we adults, we believe that we can't be questioned, or our decisions can't be questioned. But children have the right to ask why this is happening with me. For example, if you say we share an office, or we go to our office, each of us has been designated a place, that this is Shubhangi's place, this is Vanita's place, this is Asmita's place. Now, if I'm being moved to somewhere, I will ask them, why am I being moved? I was assigned this place. Why am I being moved? And it's my right to know why am I being moved? Maybe I'm being moved because this place has ants infestation, and I've been having trouble with that. And maybe that's why the HR decided to move me, to help me, be comfortable in my office. Children also have similar rights. They have the right to ask why this decision is being made, especially in matters that concern their life and the way they're living. If I'm changing their school, if I'm changing their locality, I need to give them a reason. And children have right to ask why this decision was taken. With a whole lot of time, the adults get very uncomfortable. Then why am I being questioned? Because it could be our social structure, our the kind of cultural norms that we come from. Sometimes these ideals can also make adults uncomfortable if children are questioning them. But let's all understand that it's important for everybody's well-being to know why such decisions were taken that are impacting me in such a great way, right? So right to participation is an important right of children. Then right to protection, and this is what we're going to talk in detail about. Right to protection from what? Right to protection from abuse, all kinds of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, protection from all kinds of abuse, neglect, and economic exploitation, etc. So before we move on and talk about child sexual abuse, let's look at the term abuse itself and what it means. So when we speak about abuse, when we ask what abuse is, the generic idea around abuse is the forms of abuse. But let's also define what abuse is, not just the forms, but what abuse itself means. So when you look at abuse, when you look at abuse, this is the definition that we are referring here. It's abuse is any act which results into actual or potential harm to what? The child's health, their survival, their development, and their dignity. Yeah. And who is causing this harm? They are someone who shares a responsibility, who or has a relationship with the child, where they are responsible for the child, where they are trusted by the child, or they are powerful in comparison to the child. So any act, it could be an actual where it has happened right now, or it has the potential to cause harm in the future. And what is it causing harm to? The child's health, their survival, their development, or their dignity. And yes, children do have dignity. If I feel ashamed, or if I can feel embarrassed, insulted if I'm slapped in a public space, similarly, if a child is slapped in a public space, they would feel embarrassed, insulted, yeah, and not just hurt physically, but hurt emotionally as well. And the person who's causing this harm is someone who is responsible for the child. Yeah, they share a relationship where they're responsible, they are trusted, and they're powerful than the child. And always remember, where abuse is concerned, abuse is never accidental. It is not something that accidentally happens. It's not where you didn't know that the child was standing behind you and you turned around very fast and by mistake you hurt the child. Yeah, it's raising my hand and hitting the child. It's a conscious thing. Even if I was so angry and I was, I just didn't understand. It's important that we know that, okay, right now I'm so angry that I don't have any control over my senses. It's important that we step away then. The fact that we raise our hand, it also, comes from the space where at some conscious, subconscious level, we also believe that it's okay to hit children. It's okay if I hit them in anger. Later, I'll go and say sorry. Maybe I'll offer a chocolate and I'll just say sorry. But no, just by saying sorry, you can't take away the abuse that the child has experienced. So no, it is always intentional. It is not accident. Yeah. And why we are saying it's intentional and not accidental. Even someone who's, very hot tempered, very, very hot tempered. No matter how angry they are, if they will not raise their hand at their boss. Yeah, so my boss came to me and screamed at me, nah, Shubhangi, you are stupid. Shubhangi is dumb or whatever. They said very mean, rude things to me. Even in the worst case of anger, I will not raise my hand at my boss. And why I will not do that? Because I know my boss is more powerful than me in this professional setup. But because we understand that a child is a child, they're not powerful than me. I can get away with it. That's why we go ahead and we beat up the child. And that's why it's intentional and not accidental. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Yeah. So there are different forms in which child abuse can happen, and few of them I'm sure you all are aware of. Physical abuse, where the child is being beaten up, or any physical harm is being caused to the child. The child is made to go hungry, or the child is starved as a form of punishment. Emotional ill treatment could be calling names, making the child feel stupid, or humiliating the child in any way. That could be emotional ill treatment. Then neglect, and neglect is interesting in a way. Why? Because it could be happening right under our noses and we may not come to know that it is happening. A child could be coming to school every day and we may not know that the child is being abused. But there are some signs that you can look out for. For example, a child who usually will come back with unfinished homework, or a child who comes back home or comes to school where they don't have their tiffin every day, or their clothes are unkept, their hair are not clean or not well made. You can see that they're not kept well. Usually, in at least in our context, most children will come with oiled hair, two ponies, or their hair is cut regularly, given haircut regularly. If such care is not being taken, it is a sign that maybe something is off, and maybe we can go and explore more. And then there's sexual abuse. Let's look at what sexual abuse is and how do we define it. I'm sure you all must have heard about it, and it is in today's day and time, thankfully it's spoken about at least through news, etc. But let's talk about and understand the nuances of child sexual abuse. Yeah. So how do we define child sexual abuse? Any act using a child for the sexual gratification of the more powerful person. So there are three things that you should look out for. One, there is a child. A child is someone who's below the age of 18. Yeah. Then there is a powerful person. And now when you talk about powerful person, whom do we call powerful? A powerful person need not always be someone who's physically strong. Yeah. A powerful person could be someone who has a lot of money, or someone who's influential, someone who has a position where their position grants them that access, response, or this respectability, or this sense of that I can get away with anything. Such positions can also give a person power. A religion, caste can also be a space where people can draw power from. So when you look at power, don't look at it as this concept that exists in a vacuum. Power can be the sources of power can be many, and the it can manifest itself in various forms. It can be physical, yes, but it can be mental power as well. Somebody who's older than the child, somebody who shares a relationship with the child. Even these aspects of a person's life can also give them power over the child. Yeah. And then last being the intent. What was the intent behind the act? The intent was to receive sexual gratification. So a powerful person using a child, someone below the age of 18, to receive sexual gratification out of it. Yeah, that's what child sexual abuse is. You take any case of child sexual abuse, you'll find these three concepts in it. A powerful person, the intention was to receive gratification. Yeah, and there was a child involved. Now, what about this act? What are the different forms, or what are the different acts through which child sexual abuse can happen? Let's give a look at. Okay. So what are the different forms of sexual abuse? There are two different forms. Yeah. One is contact abuse. Contact abuse, as the name suggests, where touch is involved. Any kind of touch is involved, that is contact abuse. In legal terminologies, it is considered or called as penetrative sexual assault and sexual assault. Later in the day, when we talk about POCSO, these terminologies will make more sense. Yeah, so hold on for some time. My colleague later in the day will explain to you what penetrative sexual assault and sexual assault have to do with sexual abuse. Yeah. So contact abuse, under which there is penetrative sexual abuse, where penovaginal intercourse, anal sex, oral sex could be performed on the child, or the child could be made to perform on the adult. Yeah. Touching the child's private body parts, or making the child touch the powerful person's private body parts. Here, I would like to bring it to your notice that not necessary that private body parts are the only parts of the body that could be touched. Yeah. If the abuser is fondling or touching the child any part of their body, it could be their back, it could be their thighs, it could be their stomach, their lower backs. Yeah. So if the abuser is fondling or touching the child's body, not just the genitals, not just the private body parts, but their body, with the intent to receive sexual gratification, yeah, that act will also be called as sexual abuse. Okay, because it's not just limited to private parts. And if it's a confusing concept, private parts are those parts of a body that are covered by by a swimming costume or with the underwear, undergarments. Yeah. Let's look at another form of child sexual abuse, that is non-contact form of abuse. In under legal terms, it is called as sexual harassment. So what are the different forms in which non-contact form of abuse can happen with the child? Where the child is being exposed to pornographic material. Yeah. And in today's age and day, it's even more common. Why? Because the mobile phones or tablets or internet is so very accessible these days. So sometimes children, WhatsApp, sometimes children receive messages on WhatsApp where they're sent small clips or pictures where private body parts are visible. Yeah. So if a child is being exposed to such pornographic content, if a child, the child is not touched, but the abuser is indulging in any sexual activity in front of the child. Maybe they're masturbating in front of the child, or maybe they're having sex with another adult in front of the child. They're not touching the child, but they are ensuring that the child is exposed to them involved in such activities. They are talking to the child in sexual language. Yeah. Or they're talking about sexual activities in front of the child, or they're passing comments of sexual nature about the child's body. Yeah. Also exposing their own genitals, their own private parts to the child, or looking at the child's private parts when the child is in a state of undress. Say they are using toilet, or they are taking a bath, or they're changing clothes. So where in such moments, looking at the child, again, the intention behind it is to receive sexual gratification. Yeah. And the other form of child online non-contact form of abuse is online sexual abuse. And yes, children can be sexually abused online also. It may seem a foreign idea, but yes, it is happening. And during the pandemic, there were multiple such cases where sexual abuse, online sexual abuse, number of online sexual abuse cases have been reported as well. So let's look at what are the types of sexual abuse that can happen online. Now, when online sexual abuse happens, it's not where all of a sudden somebody has sent a message or sent an image to the child and the child is exposed to something unsafe. Yeah. Online also, the abuser would build a relationship with the child, where the child is either tricked into doing something sexual, or the child is pressured into doing something sexual. Maybe they're tricked into sending their images, or they're tricked into having conversation, or maybe doing a video call, or pressured into doing something like that. And what all things that can happen, as I said, somebody sharing pornographic videos or photos online or over WhatsApp messages. Bullying can also be a form of sexual abuse that can happen online. For example, say somebody has morphed or used Photoshop to superimpose somebody's face on a naked image, and this image is being floated around or is put up on social media platforms, and the child is humiliated for it, or the child is being bullied by somebody calling them names such as so and so is a slut, so and so is a nympho, so and so is calling them names that are sexual in nature and at the same time humiliating in nature. Then there is something called cyber stalking. Now, if you look at the word stalking, stalking means somebody's following uh, somebody's following the child. Yeah. Now, when you look at cyber stalking, this following is happening online, and they may not be, following the child in terms of going wherever the child is placed physically, but keeping an eye on whatever the child does, everything that the child does. So, liking everything that the child has posted online, keeping a track of who all they meet, the kind of places they go, etc. Yeah. And cyber stalking could be happening while children are unaware completely, or they are not even interested. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about safety to children, we always talk to them how important it is to not tag or give a live location on social media platforms. Because sometimes children have teenagers especially may have these way where they online check-in happens. So the moment they go to this particular cafe, they go to their college, or they go to their friend's house, they would immediately take a selfie with their friends and add a check-in that, I am here chilling with my friends, or this at this location. We explain children why it's unsafe. If somebody is cyber stalking them, they have their live location of where they are. And if children has if a child has a pattern that these are the daily frequent places that the child will visit, it's very easy for me to track down and maybe ambush the child while they are visiting these places. So yes, you want to check in, you want to put up post online, all right, fine, but do it after you left the place, not while you are there. As also, if you frequent to one such place, don't put up your give out your address, your college, school, home address, where people can easily find you. So these are some of the things that we can talk to children about. Yeah. Then sending or asking for sexual photos or text messages, showing children inappropriate sexual content, or encouraging children to create such content of their own. A lot of the content that exists online, there was some study that said a whole lot of content that exists online is self-created by children. Children created the or have sent these messages, have sent these photos themselves, either under pressure or because they were tricked into sending such messages, or creating such videos, etc. Online sexual abuse can also happen by if somebody is watching content that has child pornography, because for someone to watch that content was created somewhere, and for that content to create, or that content to be made, some child was abused to make that content. So if somebody is watching such content, somebody is distributing or creating such content, they are again responsible for the demand and supply. The more the demand, the more the supply. That means more children getting sexually abused. So even that is a form of sexual abuse. Blackmailing children for sexual gains, for financial gains, also a form of sexual abuse that can happen on them. I hope you all are with me. Okay, so let's move on. I'll also share some statistics with you around the issue. So in 2007, there was a study done by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. The study was done in 13 states, and it involved they had interviewed more than 12,000 children. Through this study, two major misconceptions were cleared. Yeah. Before, if I remember back then, when I had started talking about child sexual abuse, back then also there was this sense that only, you know, sexual abuse only happens in Western parts of the world, where people are more uh, uh, open, or people indulge in wearing small clothes, or where people are very open with sex and sexuality. These are the parts where sexual abuse happens. In a country like ours, sexual abuse does not happen. There was a misconception that a whole lot of people had, but this study broke this myth around it, that no, 53% of our children have experienced one or the other kind of sexual abuse. Yeah, if you have to break this percentage down, in every two children, one child has experienced one or the other kind of sexual abuse. Both girls and boys are equally vulnerable. Another myth that many people believed in, that boys can't be sexually abused, only girls are sexually abused, and that's why a whole lot of support and supervision and care was given to girls, whereas boys did not receive any safety conversation also. No, that again a very, very big myth. Children, all children, irrespective of their sex and gender, are vulnerable, and all children require conversation, require supervision, require support. Yeah. Now, some recent statistics. These statistics were shared by. We got this from the National Crime Record Bureau. It's a national agency that keeps track of all the reported cases within our country. Yeah. So from the data shared for 2020, it was observed that there was a 13% decrease in the reported cases of crime against children. Compared to 2019, in 2020, there was a decrease in of 13% in the rate of crime against children. Does this mean that child sexual abuse did not happen, or does this mean that because of lockdown, reporting didn't happen? Since again there is no such study that can help us draw those conclusions, it is very it's very difficult to say what caused this decrease in the crime, reporting of crime against children. And crime against children is everything. Crime against children is not just sexual abuse, it covers everything: rape, murder, kidnapping, etc., etc. So of all the cases that were reported in 2020, 43% of all the crime against children, of all the crime reported cases of crime against children, 43% of cases were of POCSO, or cases of child sexual abuse. And of this 43%, 96% cases were filed under the section 4 and 6, which are again sections that cover rapes under POCSO. And all of these 96% cases, the offenders were known to the child. The victim knew the offenders. And to break it down further, and around 151 sexual abuse cases were reported in a day. 6 cases were reported in an hour. Yeah. Again, a huge number. Even if it were one child getting raped or getting sexually abused in a day, it is still a huge number. But 151 cases per day is a lot of cases. These cases were again reported under POCSO, and some were also in some cases IPC was also taken into consideration. Now, other than POCSO cases, some cases were also reported under the 376, section 376 and 354 of IPC. Both these sections deal with cases of rape and harassment. Okay. And for online sexual abuse in the year 2020, a total of 842 cases of cyber crimes were reported, of which 738 cases, which is almost more than half, no, not just more than half, almost all of the cases were of where child sexual abuse material was published, was distributed, or was shared online. 738 cases of 842 cases. That's again. Now, in comparison to 2019, in 2019, only 101 cases were reported of cybercrime. So the reporting is also increasing, which is a good news. The more number of reporting, the more people are, caught hold of and are held accountable for what they've done. Okay, now here I would like you all to take a deep breath, because that was again a lot of information, and numbers at times can also be overwhelming. So whoever is listening, I want you all to take a deep breath, have a sip of water maybe, tell yourself that we are here, we're listening to this information so that we can protect children better. Yeah. The moment we get scared, we will not be able to process anything further that we're going to listen to. So I want you all to take that deep breath and come back. Yeah. Okay. Now that we're done with statistics, let's also understand who are these children who are more vulnerable to getting sexually abused. Now, when I say more vulnerable, does not mean that they will for sure get sexually abused. It just means there are more chances of them getting sexually abused. Yeah. So children who are who have low self-esteem, again, does not mean that all children with low self-esteem will be abused. Just more vulnerable to getting sexually abused. Children with low self-esteem, possibility that they will be sexually abused. Why? Because sometimes, children with low self-esteem will not be able to come and talk about what has happened to them. Yeah? They will not feel confident enough to reach out to someone. Then children who come from families or come from households where problems such as marital discord, domestic violence, financial instability, persistent or terminal illness, substance abuse. In all these cases, there's one common element. And if that common element is neglect. The adults in the home are so involved or engrossed in whatever is happening at their level. Not blaming them, not judging them, but they are so engrossed in whatever is happening at their level. In such moments, it's very common that children get neglected. And taking this opportunity, offenders or abusers can target children from such spaces because they are neglected, because nobody is paying attention to them. And they're more easy to manipulate because nobody is again supervising what the child is doing. Children who are fearful, overly fearful of adults, then of course there has to be some respect towards everybody regardless of the age. But children who are fearful of adults will not question what the adult is saying them or telling them to do. If the adult is telling them to take their clothes off, this child will not think twice before doing it. They will just do it because they're being told to do it. Children with parents who are too busy. Again, neglect is high. Children without parental care, such as, say, orphans or children who are unaccompanied. Children living on the streets or children who are laborers. Children living in institutions. Migrant children. No proper supervision, no proper parental care. And when we say supervision, we do not mean somebody constantly hovering over the child. What we mean is somebody, who cares for the child, who's aware of what the child is doing, who the child is playing with, where the child is spending their time, what kind of games they're involved in. Somebody who's involved, but is not hovering over the child. Children living with mental or physical disability. Children are vulnerable. Why? Because they're children. They're vulnerable. The fact that they're children makes them vulnerable. You add any of these factors to it, and their vulnerability increases. When you add disability in it, again, their vulnerability increases. A child who cannot see, or a child who cannot listen, or a child who has any mental disability cannot understand what is happening with them. For children living with such disabilities, it will be extremely difficult for them to, seek help. Sometimes identifying that children with disability are abused, sometimes that itself can be a challenge, because children lack vocabulary. Children, the adults around them don't have the awareness around the issue, and in such times it becomes even more challenging for adults and children to reach out or understand that abuse is happening. Children who have suffered one or another or some other kind of abuse, what happens? Say a child was physically abused, yeah, and if you've seen any children or any child getting beaten up, if the child tries to resist the abuse, tries to stop or hold the hand, or tries to stop the abuser from hitting them, the abuser would get even more angry that the child resisted and will beat them more. From this entire experience, what the child has learned? The child has learned that if I try and stop them, I get beaten up more. So what's the best thing that I can do is, they will hit me 4 times and they will be done with it. So I'll keep quiet, take the beating and let it pass. Now, when the same child is sexually abused, unfortunately, they will use the same template over here also. That if they are doing this with me, if I try to stop them, the abuse will increase. So what do? I take quietly whatever they are doing and move on. I do not try to resist. I do not try and do anything to stop them. Yeah. Children who are stigmatized. Children who are labeled as, say, a child who's labeled as a liar, a child who's labeled as a troublemaker, a child who is labeled as a loose character, a slut, or similar such adjectives. A child who has been stigmatized will not be believed, will not be given the kind of support that they require. Also, at times, when we are told that this is what you are, this is what you are, we also start believing that maybe this is what I am. I am a slut. I am a liar. I am a troublemaker. So children who have been stigmatized will not be believed if they're seeking help. And sometimes they will not even try to seek help because they know that nobody is going to believe them. And all these children, or children living in such similar circumstances or situations, are more vulnerable to getting sexually abused. Yeah. Now to understand how this happens, so we've talked about what all can happen. Now let's also look at how does this happen? As I said, sexual abuse is not accidental. Yeah, it is intentional. Now, when the moment we say intentional, that's where the planning factor of sexual abuse comes in. And this planning is called as grooming. So what is grooming? Let's look at it. Grooming is a process in which abuser A draws a victim into a sexual relationship. So they will target this child, a child who is, say, quiet, a child who does not have a support system, a child who is very, very scared or has low self-esteem. So they will try and get this child involved into a sexual relationship, and will also build that relationship where they maintain secrecy. They will groom the child. They will prepare the child where the child knows that I cannot go and talk about it, either because nobody is going to believe, or B, because there is nothing wrong happening. This is a loving relationship. This is a nice relationship. See, mummy, papa don't even spend time with me, but this uncle or this auntie, they always play with me. They always spend time with me. So they build that relationship, and gradually they turn this relationship into a sexual relationship. Yeah. And this grooming begins way before the abuse, actually the abuse starts, where the touching or the showing, any form of abuse. Before the abuse happens, the relationship, this grooming has begun much earlier. And when the abuser is grooming the child, is preparing the child for the abuse, the abuser simultaneously is also preparing the family or the support system of the child, so that they also don't recognize, they also don't become suspicious that okay, something is wrong or something is happening here. And most times adults also don't realize that abuse, or they are being groomed for abuse. Why? Because grooming looks like any normal human game. The way you build a relationship with any new person, you go and greet them, you say hello, you help them out. Grooming looks similar to that process. And that's why sometimes even adults are unable to identify that they're being groomed for the child to be abused. Yeah. Sorry. Now, as I already said, grooming can also happen and can also be seen in online sexual abuse. Where online sexual abuse happens, even there grooming can be seen. So it's not just where physical space grooming is happening in physical spaces. Grooming can also be seen in online spaces, where the child is tricked into a relationship and abuse is happening. Also, let's remember, the better the grooming, the more difficult it will be for the child to disclose about their abuse. Yeah. And it will be even more difficult for the child to seek help in case where they are being sexually abused. And that's why knowing about grooming is so very important. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's look at how does it impact children. So when sexual abuse happens, the immediate impact is visible on their emotions. So a child could be experiencing fear, the child could be experiencing embarrassment, the child could be experiencing confusion, shame. Yeah. There is also shock that someone they trusted, someone they liked, did something like this with them. There is also intense feeling of anger. There could be an intense feeling of anger, or towards whom? Yes, they could be angry towards self, they could be angry with the abuser, but there is a whole lot of anger towards people who did not help. Abuser was the bad person, all right, but you all were good people, right? You all were good people. Then why didn't you help? How come you didn't understand, or how come you didn't identify that something like this was happening? There could be shame around their body, their self, that I am dirty, I am bad. But let's remember that child sexual abuse is never the child's fault. Even if the child themselves believe that it's their fault, let's remember and let's reiterate to the child that what happened was not their fault. And these are some of the visible signs that can help us understand if a child was being sexually abused. Now, before I go into these signs and symptoms, one thing that we can, because maybe after this session, we may not even remember all these different indicators that we would be talking about. Let's remember one thing. Any any each and every child will have their own normal. Okay. Now, um, when sexual abuse happens, there would be some disruption in this normal, and that's what we have to look out for. If you can't remember any of the signs and symptoms that we'll be sharing here, think about that normal that your child has. If in your classrooms, at homes, any child you may know. If there is any disruption in this normal, we are required to go and have a conversation with the child and understand what is causing this disruption. Yeah. So what are these visible indicators? And these are some of the spaces where these indicators you will be able to observe. One is behavioral, where there could be social withdrawal, there could be increased hostility or aggression, over-pleasing behavior, drastic change in achievement patterns. Physically, we could see psychosomatic illnesses. Psychosomatic illnesses means psycho is the brain, soma is the body. Yeah. Now, if something is affecting me mentally, say the child is stressed about the abuse, this stress would manifest itself through the body. The child could be giving out symptoms such as frequent headaches, frequent stomach aches, or feeling feverish at certain point in time or of the day or the week. Because when you look at psychosomatic illnesses, if you go to the doctor and you ask the doctor, okay, the child is complaining about stomach ache, something is wrong. The doctor will check and give you a diagnosis that nothing is wrong with the child. Maybe the child is making up stories. However, though for psychosomatic illness, there is no medical cause for it, does not mean that there is no reason why it is happening. Yeah. Psychosomatic illness may not have a physical diagnosis, but it does not mean that the child is not experiencing it. The child is feeling the pain. Yeah. Physically, there could be pain or swelling in genital area, repeated urinary infections. In children, if they are not drinking enough water, even that can cause UTIs. But if they are frequent in nature, that means something is off. Yeah. In sexual, there could be sexualized behavior, there could be early sexual activity, or the language that the child is using is sexual in nature. Again, when we say early sexual activity, we do not mean 16-year-olds showing interest or feeling sexual attraction. Here we are talking about, say, a child who's 8 or 9 is showing interest in sexual activity or is imitating sexual activities. Yeah, these are the signs that we have to look out for. Psychologically, eating and sleeping disturbances, anxiety or indifferences, depression, suicidal ideation or attempts. These are some of the psychological signs that we can look out for. Of all these signs, these are only indicators. These are not sure signs of sexual abuse. What are sure signs of sexual abuse? If the child becomes pregnant, if the child has sexually transmitted infections such as HIV, gonorrhea, syphilis, all these are sexually transmitted infections. And if the child comes and tells you, these are the only sure indicators. Rest are all indicators that are telling you, go and talk to the child. Something is off. We need to go and have a conversation with the child. The child could be socially withdrawn because maybe they're angry with you, or maybe they had a fight with their friends, and that's why they're angry, and that's why they're keeping quiet. Yeah, but not necessarily everything is a clear indicator of sexual abuse. Except for these sure indicators, the rest are just indicators for us to go and have a conversation and understand what is happening. Now, these are some visible indicators. Say these indicators were completely ignored. Nobody identified that, okay, the child was sexually abused, and the sexual abuse continued, went on, and no help was given to the child. In such case, it can also go, these things can also go on to impact these children when they grow into adults. Yeah. And these are 4 spaces where the impact could be visibly seen. One is relationships, because the child's the child's trust was broken at such a young age. They could find it very difficult to trust people when they grow into adults. And because there is no trust, they would have trouble sustaining relationships. And relationships is not just romantic relationships. They could be friendships or professional relationships. Inaccurate judgments, their idea of safe and unsafe could be extremely skewed. My safe and your safe could mean completely 2 different things. And there is also a possibility that they either could perpetuate or become a target for domestic violence. Yeah. Now, if you look at the sexuality aspect, there's a possibility that they themselves become offenders, sexual offenders, when they are adults. Now, why is it happening? Why are they becoming offenders? Why are they perpetuating violence on somebody? Why are they going and abusing someone else? When they were young, they realized that I am helpless to do anything. And how do I not be helpless? How do I become powerful? And that's where they themselves could turn into offenders, where they identified with the power that the abuse had. And in order to be not helpless anymore and to be powerful, they did what the abusers did. They became the perpetrators of violence. They became the perpetrators of sexual abuse. Yeah. Other than that, in sexuality, we can also see that they will have trouble having healthy sexual relationships, because again, they were abused sexually. Their first introduction to sex was abuse. So there could be disgust, or there could be just utter shame around sexual relationships or sex in general. Yeah. They could be confused about their sexual identity, especially in cases where they were abused by, say, same-sex person. I was abused by a woman. I'm a girl and I was abused by a woman. So does that make me something else? Does that make me gay, or does that make me something else altogether? Am I not a girl anymore? So there could be, there could be confusion around sexual identity, because their own boundaries, their body boundaries were not respected as children. They themselves will grow into not identifying their own boundaries, and also not identifying someone else's body boundaries. So they could be overly sexualized behavior. They engage into touching adults or touching others inappropriately, or they will not even understand that they were being touched inappropriately, because their boundaries are so, again, very skewed, and either they just don't exist. Mental well-being, if you look at the previous slide, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, if you look at here, there are more or less same things that you can observe. Experiencing depression, suicidal tendency, self-harm behavior, anxiety disorder. Earlier, they were indicators. Here they have turned into disorders. Here they will require some professional help to deal with these conditions. Yeah. And there is also possibility.
Shubhangi, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you in between.
Yeah.
But if we can wind up in 5-10 minutes, then still
We will
have
wind
some
up
questions. Yeah.
We will wind up in the next 5 minutes. They could also be indulging in substance abuse, or either they will indulge in using harmful or psychoactive substances that can help them maybe forget or just deal with this entire situation. Yeah. Now let's talk about what is your role in keeping children safe. We will be talking more in detail in the second half about it, but what you as an individual can do in keeping children safe is what I want to focus upon here. You being here, you attending this session, you learning more about the issue of child sexual abuse is by itself a step towards keeping children safe. Yeah. In the second half of this session, we would be talking about how what we can do in ways of talking to children about personal safety. What are the things that we can do to be vigilant? What are the things that we can do as best practices to keep children safe online as well as offline? How do I understand, or how do I handle disclosure if a child comes and tells me about any unsafe situation that they're experiencing? What are the things that we can do, and how do we become advocates for personal safety? Yeah. So these are some of the things that we can do to ensure that children are safe, that they are given help when required, and be a part of the solution in keeping children safe. And with this, we can wind up or close the session for now, and we can start with any questions that have come up.
Over to you, Sheetal Dhillon.
Yeah, ma'am.
Are there any chat box
No,
questions?
ma'am, there are no questions in the chat box as of right now.
Okay, so I request all to put in your questions there, or if you want to be unmuted, then just raise your hand and you can ask questions, doubts, you can comment, you can share experience, or you can share your action point, what you want to do. Meanwhile, Shubhangi, as others are asking you something, I just thought a raw thought, and tell me whether this is appropriate.
Yeah.
Can we make a kind of a feedback box mandatory in schools, specially designed for this purpose, explaining the students what it is, and in a very secluded area, confidentiality maintained, this box can be put up so that somebody who doesn't want to come ahead and tell that the child is experiencing something can simply put a note or name.
Yeah. There are some schools who have adopted this method. However, the child may be, the confidentiality can be maintained by way of putting the box in a secluded area where nobody will come to know that I'm going and putting my question or my any queries in that box. However, the people who are going to open that box and read, maybe they will have to be trained to maintain confidentiality, where the information of the child is not shared, or the information does not get passed around, or so ensuring that only a few members of that school has access to it. Also, if the school can have a child protection policy in place, that can also help in ensuring these confidentialities are maintained within the school structure, because your child protection policy will help you create committees that who are again designated to deal with such situations. So having a child protection policy in school can definitely help. And yes, if children are not comfortable to come up, if a school has taken up this program and has conducted a personal safety program in the school, the possibility of children coming and reaching out to their trusted adults, their helping adults, is more. But as a way of an alternate, where I am not comfortable talking to anybody, and that box can be an alternate for such students who are absolutely not comfortable coming and talking to anybody. But just putting that box in there will not help. Having some conversation with children around personal safety, explaining why this box has been put in, giving them that rationale will definitely help in children making use of that.
Correct. No, I don't mean only the box, but one of the strategies could be this.
Yes.
Why I thought, let me just elaborate a bit. Why I thought, because sometimes, suppose if I experience something, I don't want you to know that who experienced, but I definitely want you to know who did it. So, I can simply, that is what I mean, that I don't want to say that, it is Asmita who's writing this. But I want to say that, you know, hypothetically, I'm saying it is the PT teacher who did it, or, you know, somebody from management, some peon or some security guard, whatever. So I want to definitely clearly tell you who did it, but
Yeah.
not to whom. That's why I
Okay.
thought ki maybe the box will work as one of the strategies.
This can be tricky. If you are, because again, if you have to take any action, if I just know that, for example, this child, somebody put this shit in this box and said that the peon has been misbehaving, or the helper didi has been misbehaving, it will be very difficult to just go by that. We may have to understand what misbehavior has happened, because when you do PSA with children, there, especially with the younger ones, there is a possibility that the grade 1 child or a grade 2 child went and spoke to somebody, their older sibling, and said that helper didi removed my chaddi in the washroom. But taken out of context, it can look very, oh my god, something really unsafe has been happening. But we know that in schools, grade 1 and grade 2 children may also require some assistance to use the washroom, and these helper didis could be helping them with their clothes to go and use the washroom. So taken out of context, it can look very scary and unsafe, but without that context, this person who maybe has not done anything could land into trouble. So just getting that information that who has done this will be not enough information to take any action that will help the child, as well as the person, stop the person who's maybe misbehaving with the child.
Yeah, I get it. Yes.
Ma'am, there's a question from one of the participants
Hmm.
about how do we sensitize parents regarding when they need to talk to the child regarding the abuse. So are there any programs or something like that where they can enroll themselves?
So they can connect with Arpan, and if they know any, say, school or community where the parents would be interested in learning more about the issue of child sexual abuse, they can connect with us and we can arrange for a session. Or else, on Arpan's eLearn portal, there is a small course for teachers and parents that they can listen to understand more about child sexual abuse. And there are again more resources for these parents and teachers to learn about the issue of child sexual abuse. So they can definitely visit the website called Arpan eLearn, that can help them learn more. There are courses available for children, there are courses available for adults, teachers and parents mainly. Also resource material for them to learn more about child sexual abuse. So as of now, there's no course that they can go and attend to, but these are some digital resource material that's there that they can access and learn more about the issue of CSA.
Thank you, ma'am.
And they can always reach out to Arpan for any session if they believe there is. Yeah.
Sure. Asmita, ma'am, there are no other questions or queries in the chat